Next Sunday is Palm Sunday. And so as we approach a time of remembering Jesus' death and resurrection, I felt led for us to take some time to ponder the things that Jesus said and did. He came to bring good news. He taught and told stories that we may know how to live and find eternal life. He did amazing miracles, changing so many people's lives, and he wants to work in yours and my life too. He came to make God known. People heard him teach and said, "No one speaks like this man." They saw the miracles and were amazed. They enjoyed the bread and the wine that he provided on the hillside and in the wedding of Cana. Many believed, but many couldn't see Jesus for who he was and is. And the same is true today. Jesus is still changing lives. His teaching is still bringing life and life eternal, and yet so many have yet to recognize him for who he is. The disciples who followed Jesus, whose lives were changed by him, wrote his story. In John 20, verses 30 to 31, John writes, "Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name." Matthew, Mark, Luke and John all tell their story to communicate a message. And as we approach Palm Sunday, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John lead into the Palm Sunday reading with different stories. Matthew 20 verses 29 to 34 leads in with the story of two blind men receiving their sight. Mark 10 46 to 52 leads in with the story of blind Bartimaeus receiving his sight. Luke 19 verses 11 to 27 leads in with a parable of the 10 minas. And John 12 verses 1 to 11 leads in with Jesus being anointed with perfume by someone whose life he had changed. These stories together with the Palm Sunday story and the Easter story challenge us to see Jesus for who he is. The stories of blind Bartimaeus and the two blind men get us thinking as they have heard about Jesus and call out to him and have their sight restored, changing their lives. The Luke and John stories may not be as obvious, and yet as you look, we see that two of the servants honor their master by doing their best for him. The third servant saw his master as a hard man, and so hid what was entrusted to him and accomplished nothing with it that would honor his master. He failed to see Jesus for who he was. John tells the story of a woman that was so impacted by Jesus that her thank you was shown with a perfume, a very expensive perfume, being poured on him. What an expression of love and recognition. She had seen who Jesus is. She had experienced him changing her life. We know that over the next weeks we will celebrate Palm Sunday, where a crowd seemed to see Jesus for who he was. They said the right things, yet within a week the crowd would be calling for his death. Did they really see him for who he is? Even the disciples didn't fully see and understand until afterwards. Matthew, Mark and Luke record that Jesus had predicted 3 times that he would be killed and rise again from the dead prior to the event of Palm Sunday. And as Jesus rose from the dead, the pieces slotted together that they could see more fully and pass on the message of who Jesus is and the life that we may have in him. We see through the Easter story that is exactly what happened. Surely that leads us to consider and take note of all that he said. So let's come back to Bartimaeus' story for a moment. In Mark chapter 10, verses 46 to 52, we read, "Then they, Jesus and his disciples, they came to Jericho. And as Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, 'Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me.' And many rebuked him and told him to be quiet. But he shouted all the more, 'Son of David, have mercy on me.' And Jesus stopped and said, 'Call him.' So they called to the blind man, 'Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you.' Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. 'What do you want me to do for you?' Jesus asked him. And the blind man said, 'Rabbi, I want to see.' "Go," said Jesus, "your faith has healed you." And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. Bartimaeus had heard of Jesus. If you hadn't heard of him before, you have now. And I wonder if it caused you to call to him like Bartimaeus did, to look closer at who he is. But just as Jesus called Bartimaeus to himself, he calls us. And as Bartimaeus experienced Jesus for himself and received his sight, Jesus wants us to experience him and receive sight to see life his way. As we journey through these events again this Easter, would you ponder all that you've heard and seen of Jesus? Would you ponder the events of Easter once again? And in these times of trouble that the whole world is seeing right now, may we see Jesus for who he is, that we would know him more and the difference that he has come to make to yours and my life. Would you be forever changed by the truth of who Jesus is and share that message that the whole world would know? For his word and his presence brings his peace in the storm, light in the darkness, and salvation from sin and despair. These truths are going to continue to change this world, both yours and mine. And I pray that you and I would experience and know Jesus doing that in our lives, in the here and now, I pray. Amen.